So we've just finished the game, and the Sylvan Kin have won, and it was my friend Kai's very, very first game. And the reason I wanted to just have a little chat with him is he is actually a professional computer games designer, which is pretty amazing. So after his first game of Kings of War, I just wanted to have a little chat with him about his impressions, what he thinks of it, what he thinks is good game design. So I'll just move it over to Kai, and I haven't prepared any questions, so this is all done on the fly, as everything I do always is, because I'm really disorganised. Hello, Kai. I can just about see you. That's pretty good, pretty good. And when we check the sound quality, we won't be able to hear anything, but it's fine. So we've just played your first game of Kings of War. So you've just played as the Sylvan Kin against the Twilight Kin.
Yeah.
2,000 points, and you've come back with a massive victory.
With lucky dice.
And it is the first time playing Kings of War. I say, yeah, probably the dice did play an important role in the result.
Just jumping around, the dice did play a big role in the win, with the Abyssal Cavalry not going on the first round. And I think that was the most deciding thing in the game, that they just stayed on.
Yeah, there was a re-roll, a morale check into a double one, wasn't there?
Exactly.
That meant the Forest. Are they called Forest Guard? I forget. Forest Guard Horde could then charge in the rear. They stayed, and my Abyssal Horsemen got charged in the rear with 75 attacks from the Elf infantry, which is always elite. That was pretty massive, but it was. So, what did you think of the game? Did you enjoy it? That's the important thing.
Yes, I did. Not knowing absolutely nothing about the game except the name before we started to play, and I would play Sylvan Kin, which can be more or less everything.
Mm-hmm.
The rules are incredibly easy. I really like the nerf system, where you don't have to count hit points and say, oh, I take these 2 units away. It's just no fiddling around. It's just I have my one block of units which are always staying the same through the whole game until they're gone. Movement is easy. The attack arcs are pretty easy to understand. And let me just say, it's a good game. At least from the rules I know, I don't see anything extremely broken. The only thing that we already talked about is the amount of dice you have, especially with a big unit block about having 75 attack when you charge someone in the
Which I must admit, that's the first time it's ever happened. That's very uncommon that you get a horde in the rear, but it can happen.
Yeah, but even with small units where you end up with 25 dice or 30 dice or even 20 dice, it's a lot.
I mean, to be honest, I reckon about 20 dice is the most I like to roll, because after that, you're kind of, as you're trying to count out the results, you're knocking dice over by mistake. And I think about probably not even 20, actually, like 15 dice is probably the maximum I'd like to roll at one time, to be honest.
Yeah, so it's not the biggest problem in the world. It's just one thing to mention, that there is room for improvement. From all I've seen, so only having one person roll on each person's respective turn makes it a lot faster. Having the units on trays and just move them as a block makes it stuff faster. So it's pretty fluid and it's easy to play. Overall, I really enjoyed it.
Nice.
It's a nice, easy, quick to play. Even with me knowing nothing, we played 3.5 hours and managed to put in some chat beside it.
Yeah, so, learning the rules as you went.
Yeah, exactly.
This is 2,000 points. In the US, they play 2,300 because they like that little extra. But 2,000 points, this is a full battle. This isn't a small game. This is a full scale. It felt like there was enough to play with, but not an overwhelming amount of units. The only thing I really struggled with the most was names. Yeah, that's really true.
But that's in a fantasy world. It will always happen if you just don't have anything that really points to that unit.
Which one is this? Generic fantasy wood elf title 2 or 3? I forget which is which.
Yeah, exactly. But the special rules were easy enough. there weren't so many modifiers for like movement or for. There's one rule called hindered, and it can be applied to, as I understood, to more or less every situation where you have moved through something that doesn't allow normal movement. So, it's pretty easy to learn. I guess there are a lot of depth rules which I just didn't catch on because it was just my first game. But overall, pretty good game.
I think it's in an interesting place, Kings of War, because the rules. You think of a mass fantasy battle game. You think it's going to be really crunchy with rules, lots of layers. But Kings of War isn't. It's all very straightforward. Okay. The issue I think the game has in getting new players in is you play a game, have fun, and then okay, now I need an army, and it's not like okay, if I paint 10 Space Marines, I'm good to go. Obviously then you could play it with card cutouts or something, but then I think you're losing a lot. You're losing a lot of what makes the game really cool, and then having to go away and paint this many
that's for all fantasy games, right, where you have big units. So I remember one of the things what we were talking about. It's the your turn, my turn thing.
Right, exactly.
It would be probably nicer if you have a more interspaced turn order, but it's also not a deal breaker. I
think the reason they didn't go for that is just speed. I think I'm with you. I agree. I like having to think my opponent's going to move next. But I think from a tournament perspective, and this was designed very much with tournaments in mind, is you do everything quick. You roll all the dice on your turn, then it's the next person, and it happens quickly. I agree with you. I'd be very interested if it's you activate a unit, I activate a unit, or if it has the, for example, the bolt action dice mechanic. But it does slow the game down, and it is supposed to be a far simple game. But I think it is a very interesting point, and I think a lot of newer games, quote unquote, do have more kind of dynamic activations, and I think that is very interesting. But it's I do also like the fact that Kings of War, I could just turn up with 2 printed lists and some models and literally a table. and Kai can, he's a very smart guy, but he can play a game and hopefully have fun on his very first game. And very quickly you had a good idea of what you were doing. You were looking at your cavalry going, right, I want this to be on the flank. I want this Silver Breeze unit to be shooting arrows. And you had a very good idea of what you were supposed to be doing, and actually we played a bespoke, so we played a scenario which we just made up to tell the story, and Kai very quickly put a load of tree men and a load of high nerve, high defense stuff on this point, and I just couldn't chew through. These are all the dead bad guys here. Just couldn't chew through enough, and it was really fun. Thank you so much, buddy. So in game design in general, do you tend to come up with theme first, or like when you ask a songwriter, do they come up with the lyrics or the tune first? Do you come up with the gameplay mechanics or the theme, or does it kind of all happen at once?
Oh, that's a hard question. I guess it's a bit different with stage of development you are. When you start, me personally, I start to think in the narrative, in the storytelling first. So what want to do my heroes to do? Will it be something in World War II, or is it the future, or is it? And then, what is the basic conflict of the game? Why do these people fight? And after I establish that, then I'm looking, do I want to have a more realistic game, and do I really fine in the mechanics of the weapons? Do I have to see how are the reload mechanics, or is it just I want to have people have really big guns and doing loads of explosions? So it comes from a lot of different angles until you are at a point where you say, okay, now I actually know what game I want to make. So I didn't really have the answer where I come from, but
so that was a super interesting answer. So could you start off with a game where you think, okay, I want to be Aladdin riding on a magic carpet because that sounds cool, and then could that game turn into World War One fighter planes. Do games change radically from the initial ideas to fit what mechanics you think are cool, or do you typically start with something and see it through and just build on those initial ideas?
Well, that's. I think it wouldn't be as radical as turning from Aladdin to World War One, except for World War One in maybe of the Arabic Peninsula. Then you could, for example, I could see a game where you can see. Let's stick to that saying for World War One, and on one side we have. I don't know the British. On the other side we have some kind of rebels that are fed on a old genie legendary where they fight more with kind of magic powers, and the other side is more grounded and using realistic weapons for that age. So you could actually somehow go from the one to the other.
Yeah.
But
I'd love it like a War of the Worlds type game.
Yeah, exactly.
With like steampunk.
Yeah. That's more where it would end up in the end. It's like one side is magic, steampunky, the other is more grounded, but probably just be more highly motivated and more better trained. So you have very different mechanics on both sides, which it's always interesting to have a asymmetric component in the game.
So instead of like having a Second World War shooter where you've got an American dude with a rifle versus a German dude with a rifle, you have basically they're exactly the same training, exactly the same kit as far as the gameplay is concerned. You have something that's really different.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And what was cool is we started talking pretty early about the story we wanted to tell with our game of Kings of War, and I really enjoyed that. And I think that adds another dimension, because I think Kings of War is a very good tournament game, but I really think coming up with our own reasons why people are fighting, I think that's just adds a completely different, interesting dimension to it.
Yeah, it makes the game more feel alive than having two mechanics put against each other. It's when you have a motivation why people or beings fight, it always seems like there's more than just, I move a block of statistics from there to there.
Yeah, that's exactly. That's exactly right. Because you want to, I'm sure you want to get to the point where there is all that maths going on beneath the surface with a game, but you want to hide that as best as possible, so people feel like they're playing a narrative, almost playing a role play. It's the same with role-playing games. That's got maths behind, punchy game mechanics behind the surface.
So people should worry less about the mechanics, but more about what they want to do in the game, and the game should just be a vehicle to transport their experience.
Absolutely. And Kai's a big... do you mind if I show the books? He's a very, very big RPG guy. I can't quite see, but these are all RPG books. And so obviously storytelling, I guess in lots of different ways, storytelling, verbal storytelling, is very interesting. And if you're playing a game, or if I'm playing, let's say, a PC game, I find the least interesting way of storytelling is just in full motion video. Is just in a video.
Yeah.
And I often think, like, for example, with Devil May Cry, let's take that as an example, which I've hardly ever played, but I played one years and years ago. I felt like the best, coolest stuff was happening in the video. And I thought, I wish I was playing that. Why can't I?
Yeah.
Why can't the game tell me this, give me this information with me playing the game? Even going back to Half-Life. It found interesting ways to tell a story, right?
Half-Life was so awesome telling stories while you are in the game, but it's really, really, really hard, because the hardest thing is to have the player focus on the actual story part, because if he's completely free to do what he wants, he can look any other way and then potentially miss a critical part of the story. So it's way easier to just lock him in the video sequence where he just has to look at that point that is important. That's why so many people do it.
In BioShock, you go into the biodome and you have to stand in that little space and watch the video.
Yeah.
You can't turn away. That's really interesting. So there are more subtle ways of doing it, but you can't trust the gamer, you can relay the information to the gamer in the way you need to.
Exactly. So if you would have piece story A, B, and C, and you can't confirm player has seen piece A, piece B would also have to make complete sense without knowing piece A. So, and that leads very much to very generic story parts.
Yes.
So it's hard to confirm that.
And with something like a sandbox, sorry, please keep talking, Kai. Something like a sandbox game, I think so if you take something like Fallout, where you're doing the opposite of forcing someone to go from A to B to C, if you've got an open world game, you're trusting the user to some extent to tell their own stories and make their own fun, exactly. Right? Yeah. And I think that can be amazing, but it can also be really inconsistent. Because in those games, I have had amazing experiences where I've suddenly wandered off and, oh my God, there's a building full of radroaches, and, there are all these tapes I'm finding telling fragments of a story I don't know. And that's amazing. But in another situation, I can just wander off and think, what am I supposed to be doing?
Exactly. And it's also not for everyone just to experience it. Also, there are a lot of people who just want to be told a story without having to worry about, do I find the correct pieces of story? So, as always, there are pros and cons to it. When I was working on a VR game some time back, and we also tried to tell a story without logging the player in, and we found it was extremely hard to do because people have so short attention span, so you have to package it all in very short scenes where the player is like, oh, I'm looking for 20 seconds at that point, and then you can be pretty certain that players are just start to look around and then miss some part of the story.
Yeah, I mean, it's the internet's part of the problem, but I've got a really short attention span at the moment.
Who hasn't?
And so, so that is, you're right, that's a real problem. So if you're trying to tell a story slowly, you need to give enough to keep people interested, don't you?
Yeah.
And actually, as we were playing, and I really enjoy it, just to bring it back to Kings of War, is we were telling, we came up with our idea for this scenario of the sorcerer's daughter getting sacrificed on the altar, which by the way didn't happen. But then actually, but actually I knew I was going to lose the game, but I knew I could actually kill the sorceress. So out of spite as the bad guy, I murdered the mum. Yeah. So that, and actually I had a sort of little pang of guilt over that, because it's not quite so good news anymore for the goodies. So it's we're making, with the dice and with the little painted models, we are making our own stories.
Yeah. And that killing can also just lead to the next match.
Hey,
because
absolutely.
Of the daughter having a wrench on the soulbane.
And maybe the daughter's getting more powerful.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe the mother left her book.
Something like that. So it's just if you wouldn't have killed her, there wouldn't be. I mean, we could still find a reason why they did that again.
Yeah.
But so there's actually something nice to continue the story of the battles.
Absolutely, something that ties it all together, a thread going through it. That's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
And last night, actually, sadly, I don't get many. What I end up doing is buying games when they're on sale on Steam, thinking I'll definitely play that. And without mentioning it, I did buy your game.
Okay.
I think it was something like 40% off on Steam. Thought, I know it's good. I got a really good review in Eurogamer. I know it's a really good game. I'm going to get that and store it for later. Yeah. And I've got probably 500 games on Steam that I've stored for later.
Yeah, it's the same for me. So I managed to stop that habit of buying games that I don't know if I will play them at some point.
How do you do that?
I'm just looking at them and saying, you have still 300 other unplayed games.
Yeah, absolutely. But I'm the same with tabletop games, though. I'm terrible with buying stuff.
For me, it's just the whole role-playing game stuff. So, as I said before, I buy the 5 books of the Warhammer 40k role-play just now because I know they're out of print for so long.
Yeah.
And at some point, I probably won't get them anymore. So I'm just getting them without actually
knowing exactly what you're going to do with them. But also, they're beautiful books, and I'm sure even if you don't play them, you can learn little bits and pieces from each book.
Yes,
And they're beautiful things to have and enjoy.
Yeah, they're really, really beautiful. They really get really value for your money.
Yeah,
that's one thing I really enjoy in the whole role playing thing in the last years. They got from really cheap material, which you look at and know, they try to produce it as cheap as possible to make to make some money out of it, to actually getting to really, really beautiful, elaborated books with a lot of high quality narrative content in them. Even if you don't like the rules, they are still fun to read and add, in the Warhammer case, add to the universe you already know.
And it's all part of the experience, this beautiful gaming experience, isn't it? It's, the difference between having lovely painted models or grey plastic models, and you still get value. It's still a fun game with grey plastic models, but your imagination has to do more of the work, I think. And if you have this beautiful tome in front of you with all these beautiful pictures, and it inspires you way more than if you've just got this, like printed PDF like this or something like this, and you're trying to tell an elaborate, amazing story and create worlds, really. And I played last night. So sorry, just to bring it back, I played last night with a friend of mine, friend/colleague. Ashes something or other. I've already forgotten the name of it.
Remnant?
It's there we go. Have you tried it? So it's a 2-player. It's basically, hey, we could make a game like Dark Souls. I like Dark Souls. And it's kind of in a post-apocalyptic America with guns.
Yeah, I've played it with a friend. Like the first, I don't know, played 2 hours, 2.5 hours, something. And it's a nice game. I don't know if I would play more of it.
Yeah.
But, for just having a bit of fun. And one thing is the world is interesting because it's a possible post-apocalyptic world. There are some weird tree branches, but you don't get told what actually happened. So my main motivation was, what is happening here? Where's everyone gone?
Me too, exactly. And there's little hints in places, but they don't tell you what's happening.
Even being a multiplayer shooter, and not an easy one, there are narrative components, which are just motivates to keep you going. So it's a smart way to weave it together.
Exactly, yeah. I really enjoyed it more than I've enjoyed a non-tabletop game in ages. Exactly for that reason. It was the feeding. I mean, the gameplay's fun, but just giving you little tidbits of what's happened here without telling. And the truth is, none of the characters really know what happened, and everyone's sort of vaguely confused. All the survivors. It was. I really, really enjoyed it. And then, and just to bring it back to Kings of Warkai, so there's actually 26 factions you can play in the game.
Okay.
26. There's a lot of factions.
Yes.
Have you ever thought about a fantasy setting and gone, I wish I could play as pigeon minotaurs? Is there a faction you think there's missing? Because obviously there's kind of dinosaur lizard men, there's rat men, there's all kinds of.
What I would be more worried about with 26 faction is, do they really play different? Okay, so a lot of them, it's, let's say, subtle differences, but there are meaningful differences in play styles. If there are meaningful differences, then it's awesome. Can more or less, with 26 factions, I guess there are very little that are not covered. So you can really do what you really want to play. So I think that's great. I don't have full list and saying, that's exactly what I want to play.
What I think's cool is I really fancy it, but I'm not sure if it suits my playstyle, is there's kind of like the underwater people faction. And I'd love painting them up. So, you've got fish stuff, seamen. Okay. I think that's really cool.
It's a nice idea. There's a little running gap between me and a friend. When we started to get into roleplay, like nearly 30 years back now, one of the first characters I actually tried to make was a scorpion centaur.
Yeah.
And
What motivated him?
I
Going
have,
back to your beginning principles of
I have no idea what made me think of such a thing. I've never heard of it before.
no, that's true. It was original.
I think it was Rollmaster when you're playing back then, and there was all kinds of centaurs, but no insectoid centaur. So it was just actually it's arachnoid, but besides the point.
Yeah.
I was just coming up with the most weirdest thing I could think of.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
pretty
every
good.
time we started a new game, it was more like, oh, can you play a centaur, a scorpion centaur in that game? And you couldn't, obviously. But
It's niche. It's niche.
yeah, it's a very small niche. It's a running gag. So if there would be something like that, I would be totally down for the game.
That sounds good. I mean, you could do something like the Night Stalkers, who are just nightmares. So if you've had a nightmare about it, you can have it in the Night Stalkers. And a no, not a centipede.
But
Yeah, the Scorpion Centaur. Yeah, that's a nightmarish creature.
There's actually a historical or mythological equivalent. The old Babylonians had something like that as their mystical temple guards, which I found out a few months ago because a friend of mine studying archaeology, and we have been talking about her work, and she was mentioning something like, no way, there's actually something like that, but apparently there is.
Maybe in a previous life you were a temple guard and you're just remembering it, because that just seems an unbelievable coincidence. And then you met the person that would tell you that. It just seems, it can't be a coincidence.
I'm not so much into reincarnation, to be honest.
Fantastic. And so it's so interesting, Kai, talking to you. I know I'm holding a camera, so it's a bit weird, but it's so interesting talking to you about just game design and just how you come up with ideas. And I get the feeling, really, you just like telling stories.
That was one of the two motivators to actually do game design. It was one, telling stories,
Yeah.
and the other thing was creating something other people can enjoy.
That's fantastic.
So-
You make it sound so simple.
Getting into game design, or
Just in general, just the whole thing. Yeah, I like telling stories, and I like people to enjoy my stories.
yeah,
Like Stephen King, you know.
It's not getting. That was not getting me there, but that was my motivation. To
Yeah,
just start getting on
totally.
the way,
Because I think, and I'm sure I'm getting this all wrong, but Stephen King was asked, he gets asked all the time, how do you write your stories? And he just says, one word at a time. And we kind of I kind of assumed that, it just somehow happened and it came out, somehow he produced this book magically. But of course he didn't. He just sat at his typewriter and typed away for like 4 years. And all the ideas took shape as he did it, right?
I would think there are a lot of people. I mean, Stephen King is always an exceptional storyteller.
Yeah.
But I would guess, there are other people that are also very, very good. Maybe not Stephen King, but close to.
Yeah.
But they just don't have the opportunity to actually express what they want to do, or no one was looking at their books and understanding what they're doing. I guess when you do something creative, you always need a pinch of luck that actually someone finds what you are creating and is publishing it. Obviously, if you are put more work in it and showing it to more people, that the chance that you get discovered is getting higher.
Yeah, it's the same as if you're in a band, right? If you're in a really amazing band, you still need some luck. You still need it to happen.
Exactly.
But obviously your chances are much greater than if you're pretty mediocre. Funnily enough, I kind of when I was much younger, when I was growing up, I loved telling stories, drawing pictures, and I was always in my own imagination and just coming up with game ideas and things. And I just didn't have I just didn't believe in myself enough to stick with it. And I just stopped doing it. And it's only until I got to about 30 again that I just thought, sod it. I just find this fun. I want to tell little stories and just have fun. And it's really sad that I missed, sort of the formative years of my life, just not going, well, actually, I'd like to do something creative with my life instead of, working in IT,
That is what would happen with a great lot of there that are thinking, oh, it's just adolescent nonsense.
Exactly,
I
yeah.
have to get
That's exactly what it was.
a right
Yeah,
job
I have to get a
and-
proper job. I have to go and study economics, which I'm never interested in, but I did it. You
For
know.
me, the first 10 years for me was working as a gardener, and then had, through some combination of bad and good luck, ending up where I am now. So,
But is it one of those situations? Because I'm not a sort of a big believer necessarily that there is one plan, but is it just kind of circumstances? I kind of do feel that over the course of a life, you end up roughly, things kind of tend to work out as they should. So like, you got some bad / good luck, and that was your reason to kind of change path. But over the course of a life, I think it kind of averages out. If you don't,
Yeah.
do you know what I'm trying to say? I'm not explaining it
what
well.
I'm saying is, I just needed something that kicked me out of the normal life as a gardener and had to actually do something different.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people just don't have.
You had a point in your life where you had to make a change. It wasn't kind of like, oh, maybe I could go and do that. You had to do something, and then you thought, well, actually, what would I like to
This
do?
was what's happening to me. So I
okay.
had an accident, broke my arm,
Right.
and then I couldn't go on as a gardener, so I had to do something different.
Yeah.
And if I wouldn't have that, I very likely would still not do what I do now.
Yeah.
Because there was nothing that really forced me to do something completely different. And I think if people are forced to think over their choices in life and what they want to do next, then a lot of people are just not doing that, because it's way more comfortable to stay with the devil you know than to go to something that you don't know about.
Totally.
And I have the comfortable position I don't have a family to care about. Because if you have other people who depend on you,
It's really true.
then
Yeah.
it really gets hard to say, but I really want to do that.
Yeah.
But I don't know how it will work out.
Yeah.
Same for me. I didn't know if it will work.
Yeah.
But I really want to do it because I don't want to stuck anywhere where I'm not happy.
But do you know what? I'm really frightened of failing at something I care about, and isn't that sad? Isn't that really sad that kind of stops me doing things I really love to do?
Yes.
And I think the only person that is stopping me is me. Do you know what I mean? I think it's so illogical. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. But most of the time, it's not only stopping you. That's not you stopping you, but it's a lot of the perception of other people to think. How will other people perceive
That's
you?
exactly right. Exactly.
And so there's a lot of social pressure not to do something that people find weird. And especially in Germany, I don't know about abroad, but games in Germany have been until, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or 15 years ago, something children would do.
Yeah.
Gaming, be it board or computer or whatever, except for playing cards in the pub in the evening,
Right.
would be something that only children would do.
And it's something you grow out of at a certain point.
Exactly, or you're going told you grow out of.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
actually
Yes,
don't.
exactly. No, exactly. I never wanted to. Yeah, I just stopped doing it.
That is what a lot of people stops a lot of people just going deeper into games, because what would other people think? What my friends do if I suddenly turn up playing with plastic soldiers?
Yeah.
So it's a lot of social pressure that, or maybe it's even perceived or imagined social pressure.
Exactly. It might not even be there, to be
And
honest.
that is something that changed over the last years noticeably, where people are actually more free. The board games are a legit way to spend your time. And with board games, also tabletop games, which are still a bit more niche than just Settlers of Catan or something.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not something that people are actually scoffing at you and saying, oh, why are you wasting so much money and time on a bit of plastic? So I think that in the future it will be easier for people to actually live their dreams without being a very, very weird.
Yeah, it's sort of like, yeah, exactly, it being a legitimate thing to want to do. And as well as I get older, I just think there's a lot of value in having fun.
Yes.
whether it's painting models, playing games, telling stories, all the aspects of tabletop gaming. I think particularly in 2020, doing something that's fun and makes you happy is really important.
Yes.
And whether that's painting a picture, painting a plastic model, as long as you're not hurting anybody,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter what it is. If you enjoy bird watching, go and do bird watching, have fun. We're only on the planet for a short time.
Yes.
People should just enjoy what they do, and who cares what anyone else thinks, quite frankly. Yeah,
that should be the optimal.
it should,
yes.
yeah. Although I say that, but I'm terrified of my parents. So, and to bring it back round from the other perspective, Kai. So, you go and do your passion, and you really do. The Gantt chart, though, of your work life and your social fun life is there's a huge amount of overlap between your hobby and your work, right? Is that difficult in its own way? Does that bring its own difficulties, would you say?
Yes. It's not a big thing, but it's a perceivable thing, at least for me.
Yeah.
That working on computer games, it's most notably on computer games that I start to analyze everything I play.
Yeah, of course.
Except for games I really, really enjoy. There I can turn it off when I just go into the flow of the game, then it works. But most of the time it's just, how did they do that? What would I have done different? How do they think of selling them? Is also a thing, because everything I do has to be sold somehow.
Yes.
So I have to kind of know what people are wanting at the moment. And the other thing is, I play a lot less PC games than I did before.
Interesting. And that's not a conscious decision.
No, it's just at some point it's like, okay, I still play stuff I have to play for work, because I have to see what games are doing, how can we maybe adapt our games to that. But most of the times I'm turning off my computer and then starting to read and really enjoy my weekly role-playing session with my friends and just getting away from the computer.
Have you ever considered writing just for fun, writing your own RPG or making your own RPG?
A lot of times.
Yeah.
But it's the same as with a computer game. It's just really, really complicated, and I'm very much a rule person. So I think it would be hard for me to find the right, with having no experience in writing for role-playing games, to find the right point where you have enough rules for me to cover the things I want to cover. And with most modern role-playing games having a lot less rules, have also an audience for that game. Maybe I just shouldn't care about the audience because it's just for me.
Yeah.
But it's also something that is just...
And again, that's something I wanted to ask you as well, is that, I mean, you've already said that actually you do research for games for your professional life. And I was really interested whether, and obviously you're just speaking for yourself, but whether game designers just make games they want to play, or whether it's probably a combination of things, right?
Most of the time you don't make the games you want to play.
That's so interesting.
You still have the choice in to which company you go.
Yeah.
And most of the times company makes more or less the same games over their lifetime.
So they've got their successful ones.
Exactly. If I go to Creative Assembly, I'm probably going to make a Total War game.
Yeah.
And so you can choose which games to make. But if your company then says, oh, we actually want to make a shooter now, for whatever reason they should,
Yep.
then you have two choices. Either say, okay, no, I'm making a shooter, or I quit.
Yeah.
And most of the time people don't quit.
Yeah.
They're just making, okay, I'm now making a game I'm not inherently would play, but at least for me, I can most of the time find something in every game that I enjoy to create. And yeah, so the first game I worked on professionally, which was never released, should have been a mix between Sex and the City and The Sims, which is not two things I really think that would fit to me. But
Yep.
still,
You can still find things in there that you really find interesting and you
enjoy.
enjoy.
It was more the mechanical part than the story part, but it's still something I enjoyed working on.
So a good example of this, this is me being very honest. So something my wife and I enjoy doing very much is watching Let's Dance, which is the Germany dancing program. I can't dance. I don't like dancing. In fact, it makes me very, very socially awkward and uncomfortable, and I get very, very weird. But it's this massive challenge people go through. So the people go on there, and they're sort of, like B-list or D-list German celebrities. Like Boris Becker's wife was on there, or his ex-wife. They really scrape the barrel. But the people go on there, and it's really hard, right? They have a really, really hard challenge in front of them. And some of them, who you wouldn't expect, thrive under the pressure and all this work, because it really is. And I would be terrible on this, but I have so much respect for these people, and they kind of all go through an arc, right? So you see at the beginning, they have like the doddering old man who's there because people will find it funny. He's probably not going to win the whole thing, but sometimes their kind of story arc goes further than you think it will. And I'm not interested in dancing, but I find this dancing program really interesting because it's all about the people and the struggle.
It's about the characters.
It's about the characters. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
TV show called Navy CIS, or NCIS, I think it's in English.
Yeah.
And I used to watch. I stopped at some point, but I used to watch the first, 5 or 6 seasons, and it was really more about having interesting characters than telling about the weekly story they told. It's just watching the interaction between the characters. For me, it was the interaction between the characters, the recurring characters, than the case of the weekly story. So it's you. For me, it was you feel like you know the character, and follow them through their life. It's maybe a bit much, but that's it. So
and their interactions, and with every series or every episode, you're building layers and layers of that story. And
exactly.
if it's good storytelling, and you're building.
I know it wasn't good, but it was enjoyable enough for me. So
yeah. I know my dad used to watch that.
Okay.
I think I watched like 3 episodes when I go back and visit and put it on.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting. So that's in terms of a TV program. And if you were to, and obviously we haven't discussed this, if you were to design a tabletop game, what do you think? Is there something that would immediately interest you? Would you think you'd start with the story? Would you like to build like a cyberpunk skirmish game, or where do you think? What would your starting point be?
There are some rules I would like to see. So, for example, like I said, the quickly alternating turns, that I have. It's probably also then also going back to character. So it probably would be a skirmish game. Now if I think about it, because as I said, we haven't pre-planned that. Probably would be a skirmish game. I tend normally more to sci-fi than to fantasy. So it probably would be some sci-fi cyberpunk skirmish game, but I haven't thought it through though. Yeah.
I played a really good. It was called Mythos, and it was this tiny little game. It was just a bloke that loved the idea, and it was a Lovecraftian skirmish game.
Okay.
And it was awesome. It was so good on a small table. That I think the problem with the game had was you bought a box set for your faction, which was about 6 models, and then you didn't need to buy anything else. It was like €45, and then that's literally all you need to play the game. And they didn't have another way of making any money, so they weren't introducing extra characters or anything. But it was brilliantly balanced. But it's a real shame that they didn't. It kind of wasn't designed to be monetized enough to sustain itself.
That's a shame.
It's a really cool game.
If the game still works for them, if they make enough money off that,
yeah,
then it's awesome.
They didn't.
That's what I expected. So the shame. I don't know if the shame, but the fact is, if you design any game you want to sell publicly, you have to have something that makes you money.
Yeah.
So you have to either expand the game, or you have to go into the next edition just to be able to sell stuff again. Stuff again sounds so bad, but the people have a reason to buy new stuff. And I think if you do it for a skirmish game, you're probably just having a very fair model of saying, okay, I sell you 1 or 2 new models, and you can extend what you do, or can go into new faction or something.
As well, though, there's danger in that, though, because I think if you're releasing new models, there's a temptation to make them a little bit more powerful than the old models.
That's what you see with more or less all games being done. The fairest game on the computer game, at least one of the fairest game I see on the computer market at the moment, is League of Legends, which is a massive mobile game with millions of players each month.
Yeah.
And they only make money by... The only thing you can only buy for money is different skins for your characters. Everything else you can earn through money in the game, but you also can buy that in-game money. And every time they release a character, it's a bit more powerful than the other ones.
Right.
Or at least it's perceived as a bit more powerful. And most of the time they tune it back in power like 6 to 8 weeks after they released it to be in line with everything else.
But the trouble is, when they first come up with it, the amount of testing they'll do versus the amount of testing the gamers will do after even 2 weeks is crazy, right? So
it's A, that, and B, as you can also buy that in-game currency, there is probably also an intention to have it being, the character being more attractive, that people actually spend money on it, which is fair enough, that because you want to sell games and want to make money off the game, obviously. It's a perception. There's nothing I can prove. I have stopped playing the game ages ago, so I don't want to put any rumors here.
No, of course.
Just saying that there's something you need to make money off if you want to keep going. And it's also in the best interest of the player that you make money, because then he will get more of your game.
Definitely. Absolutely.
If you get value for what he's paying for, even if it's only perceived value, like I can make my character look different on a computer game, then I think it's totally fair. Because there are, for one person paying, there are 5, 6, 10, I don't know, other people who are not paying anything for the game, and it's completely fair.
It's probably quite a small percentage, but yeah, that not pay to win, I think, is awful. So if you're paying real money to get an advantage in game, I don't like that. But as you say, League of Legends, that's perfectly fair. They're selling unnecessary cosmetic things, which is just your choice to buy them.
Exactly.
That seems totally fair. And as you say, they continue to work on the game because they've got money coming in, so they can continue to make more of the thing that you like. I think that's really interesting. And I do think it's a problem. And I mean, I never really understood the kind of the AAA game model where, let's say, 100 people, I don't even know, it's probably a lot more than 100 people, work on a game for 2 years, whatever the normal cycle is. That game then comes out at €60, or, you know, maybe a special edition for €80, and then they do all that work, and then it kind of, that's it, stops, and then maybe they do a sequel with new technology, maybe they don't. That always seemed crazy to me, that all that work would go into something that's literally, you know, comes out and it's got to make its money back in 3 months or something to, you know, make millions to cover its cost.
Yeah, but it seemed it worked. Well, it still works, depending on, if you see The Witcher or Cyberpunk 2077, which are bigger companies working for longer times, but there are still games who work that way. But as you see with most games that Ubisoft is doing, it's always more as what is called games as a service. So it's, yes, you have an initial release of a big game, but the game keeps going over years with expansions and with downloadable content and stuff like that. So the initial amount of work that is done just keeps paying over and over because you can replay it again and again.
Something like Destiny 2, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Which I think is even free to play now.
Yes, the interesting thing with Destiny is initially when Activision was publishing it, it was a massive amount of money that went into it. And at some point, Activision as publisher jumped board, and Bungie just keep going. So with the publisher leaving, there has to be something for them to saying it's not worth it.
Yeah.
Or they have get paid so much money by Bungie saying buying our idea back. So again, I don't
You're an
have any
outsider,
insights.
yeah.
It's just me.
But it's interesting that
Yeah, exactly.
because you would think if it was a successful relationship between Bungie and Activision, why would they change it? But something, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know what would happen there, but I think Destiny 2 wasn't as successful as the first one, at least initially. I have no idea how it is now because I've never played it. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on where you're thinking of, why is that? How is that? And yeah, games is a weird business because it's like every kind of art you just can't plan for success. You can do something where you're reasonably well knowing it will work, but massive hits are hard to plan.
Hard to plan, but if you still do something like CD Projekt Red, where you put,
Yeah.
okay, they're chucking, but they're only so successful because they've made a lot of money being successful previously, right? They've only got millions to throw at it. But, I'm definitely going to get, Cyberpunk for €60, and I'm super excited about it because I know that's going to be good. I trust that company enough that I know I'm going to enjoy playing their game.
Yeah.
The way they tell, and particularly with the Witcher games, the way they tell stories, that's the most important thing. The little side quests and the little, you come into a town in The Witcher and it's unraveling the mystery of that little place. That's just gold. It's absolute gold. So I know that's going to be really, really good. Whereas, if there's an Activision game, I'm not going to be pre-ordering that necessarily.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I'm getting pretty reluctant with pre-orders anyway.
Been burned too many times.
Yeah, for one that, and the other is why pre-order? I can always get it on day one, and it just
Yeah, it's a really good, it's a really good point.
Yeah.
And just wondering about the changing of how video games are made and how they're presented as a service rather than this is just a game you can buy. This is a game on a floppy disk.
Yeah.
We can't upgrade it or anything. It's finished. To selling it as an ongoing service, an ongoing experience. I wonder how that relates to tabletop game design, or even if it does, but that you're buying a load of models, painting them up, and hopefully that's not the end of it, right? Hopefully the story, your story, and your rules are evolving with it.
Yeah, that is one thing that I think Games Workshop does really right, especially with 40k, where I know a lot more about 40k than I do about Fantasy and Age of Sigmar, but even with me not playing 40k anymore because of time and person constraints and friends that play it, I think the universe is still such an interesting, if twisted, place. Just to read about stories and then hear about, I don't know, characters you've heard like 20 years before, or your favorite Space Marine chapter is still something that makes it interesting to me, even.
And it's like your NCIS thing, where you're just interested in these characters, but 40k's got 30 years of building on these stories and these threads. Yeah, it's very difficult for a new game to have anything like that, right?
Exactly,
and it is so incredibly iconic.
Yeah.
The Space Marine chapters and Horus and everything.
Yeah.
That is it's sort of Greek myth type stories in this horrible universe.
The Horus got their own Silmarillion with the Horus Heresy story. Yeah? It's like it's just awesome how they. It's not like they had that; they also made something very good out of it.
Yeah.
It's just that 50 plus books recounting that epic storyline. And yeah, I mean, they have money to make more money.
Yeah.
That's probably what it comes down to. If other game companies would have as much money to spend on creating more content as GW has, they probably would also be successful. But Games Workshop is in a very unique position, at least from my perception.
Yeah, it is.
They have been there for a long time. They have been successful more or less successful for a long time, and they from the beginning on had a consistent story they've been telling. They have been a lot more than just a model company. They have also been someone telling a story to player and giving them a universe to, I won't say feel at home because I don't want to feel at home, but something where they can relate to, kind of. It's more like I'm not playing.
It feels very real. We know so much about it, and it's so well fleshed out.
Exactly. If you talk to a 40k player, he's not going to say, "I'm going to play Space Marines." I play Dark Angels. I play Ultramarines, because these are way more than just Space Marine. They have their own way to be.
And
Space
their story is so distinct.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like the White Scars are completely different from
exactly.
Iron Hands or something like this.
Exactly. So it's all about how to identify with. And if you have an identifier, it's going to be a lot easier to just stick to it than just I have some blue or grey models here.
Completely.
Yeah,
completely. And so I would say, Kings of War has very, it's getting much better, but it has very generic lore. Do you think that could, in a certain way, do you think that could also be an advantage in as much as, okay, we want to tell stories about our armies, therefore we kind of feel like we can do whatever we want with them, whereas maybe if the lore is more kind of set, then maybe we can't do some of the story beats we'd like to do ourselves because it's not in, Abaddon wouldn't do that or something like that. I'm grasping at straws a little bit, but
I know what you're saying. So it's just coming back to what Games Workshop is doing. That's why there are 10, 15, 20 iconic Space Marine chapter, but they are very clear, they make it very clear there are a lot more chapters you've never heard about because there are so many of them, that leaves you with your own free hand to create your own chapter if you want to, or you can go to one of the iconics. Leading family or leading clan or something in each faction, but saying there are also a lot more clans or families or tribes or whatever in that faction.
It has both. Either you can tie into the Ultramarine lore and Guilliman and this very, very rigid story you're a part of, or you can say no, I'm this faction and you can do whatever you like, right?
Exactly. I think that is just the right way to go, because then you have it open enough for everyone to find a niche, saying I want to be more or less there, I want to create something completely my own.
So as we were talking about storytelling earlier, with how you impart information on the player as a game designer, they're giving themselves the best of both worlds. Exactly. Because if players like their hand to be held, they can have their hand held. They can be Ultramarines and they can have a rigid story that they can enjoy. Yeah. Or they can just go out and do whatever the heck they want, and they can, or somewhere in between.
Exactly.
Did I show you my Space Marines?
No, you actually didn't.
So my faction is the Baywatch Space Marines, and David Hasselhoff is their Primarch.
No, I've seen someone creating a Hello Kitty Space Marine chapter, so I've seen it all.
Yeah. So, Kings of War actually isn't written by Mantic. So they have, I think it's about 6 people on the rules committee, and they're the senior players basically who are really good, and they write the rules for Mantic, and Mantic publishes it.
Okay, that's an interesting idea.
Which is a really, exactly, and that's coming back to their idea of kind of balancing the game, because that is the intention is that the game is really balanced. I was leading to a question and I've completely lost my train of thought.
So I'm just thinking it's if you do rules by committee, the committee should be really small. So because it gets really hard to get lost in creating rules. But I think 6 people is about the maximum you should have, but also you shouldn't have a lot less, because then you don't have enough different experiences and different ideas how to play.
And then otherwise, there's no point having a committee, right?
Exactly.
It may as well just be written by one person. Yeah. Or you might get the worst of all worlds, where you've got two people who completely disagree with each other, and then the game is very fragmented.
You always need to have some understanding, and the player, the designers should be able to talk to each other on good terms, that you can just...
Let's hope so. No! You're never taking my Hello Kitty Space Marines out of the story. No!
Exactly.
I'll die on this hill. Fantastic. Okay, so you managed to save the princess in your first game, or the Archmage's daughter. Fantastic. Kai, thank you so much. That's really kind of. Thank you for letting me hold a camera in your face and.
Saying you're going to use them into the game.
Kai, say clever stuff. Go. Fantastic. Thanks, bud. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Yay.